John McMullen will give his take on today. Doug Peterson speaking. They're getting ready for the Saints. And as John writes, at 973ESPN.com, expect to see more Josh Adams this week. Is this a true story?
I don't know if it's a true story.
I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, we'll believe it when we see it. Both Doug Peterson and Mike Gill have intimated that Josh is going to get more touches. Now, his career high in touches to this point running the football is 9. So if we can get over that number, I think certainly that's possible. But I think if you look at the matchup, the important part is that you need something because, look, ever since Doug has been here, the Eagles have been a very good time of possession team. So that's been a constant throughout this era. But I think for the opponent this week, it's probably more important than most weeks because you want to play a little keep away from Drew Brees. I think everybody can agree on that. And if you can have a couple 10-minute drives in this game, I think you got a much better chance of winning the football game. And the easiest way to get 10-minute drives, not the only way, but the easiest way is to run the football. And I think it's pretty evident that Josh Adams is the most talented runner on this team. I think everybody's starting to realize that. And it starts with the coaching staff.
John, do you think a shootout or trying to play keep away is best for Philadelphia in this one?
Well, I think it's going to be a shootout, and I think you got to play keep away. I think you got to limit the Saints' possession. They're still going to score, I think, probably 30 points. But if you can limit that number of possessions, you're talking 30 on the low end of 30 as opposed to maybe 40 or God forbid, 40 plus. So I think it's important to both of them. I mean, I think without Jalen Mills, without Ronald Darby, it's going to be very difficult to handle the passing game of the Saints. And it's kind of twofold. Rasul Douglas joked today that he thinks Michael Thomas has 90 targets and 87 receptions. It's not that bad, but it's like that. Every time Drew throws the football to him, it's a completion. And then the second part is Alvin Kamara coming out of the backfield. We all know the Eagles have had a really difficult time dealing with receivers out of the backfield, and this is the best of them all. So it doesn't look like a great matchup from a defensive standpoint. You could probably say that about every team in this league against the Saints, but it's a little bit worse because of the injuries that the Eagles are dealing with on the defensive side of the ball.
We know that Jalen Mills is out. Sidney Jones is back. You know, you had written before that this might be a blessing in disguise because Sidney Jones is probably a better outside guy than he is on the inside. We might find out that this guy's a star. Who knows? But do you think that this secondary will be better than last week?
Yeah,
better than last week in the fourth quarter.
It's hard to say better, but it's not hard to say better. They should be better because Sidney Jones is going to be significantly better, or at least should be, than, say, Chandon Sullivan. So at the end of that game, you had Rasul Douglas, Savonte Maddox, and Chandon Sullivan. Now at least you have Sidney Jones, so it should be improved, but you obviously have a much better offense as well. So I'm not sure that will show up, but certainly you at least have a hope that Sidney's going to help lock things down a little bit better. And then you want improvement from Rasul Douglas as well, because Rasul didn't play very well against the Cowboys. It was the first time this season that he's got significant playing time. So if you go back to his rookie year, early in the season when he was forced into action due to injury, he was a little bit better. So maybe now that he has that first game out of the way, maybe he plays a little bit better. But it's hard to look at Michael Thomas and say Jim Schwartz isn't going to travel, I would imagine, anyway. So the Saints are going to be able to match up Michael Thomas with who they want, and basically it's hard to imagine either of them stopping.
John McMullen at JF McMullen on Twitter. Today it was Doug Peterson meeting the media before this game, and they're an 8-point underdog in the game, and obviously a lot of people kind of counting them out. But what kind of Doug Peterson did you sense today going into this game, getting ready to go down to maybe the toughest place to play in the league right now?
I thought he was pretty confident, all things taken into account, and where the Eagles are. I think
the reason I asked, would you agree that he has seemed to be a little cranky, a little doubtful, a little different this year?
Wasn't well, certainly as a whole. There are times when he's been very, very cranky. Wasn't cranky at all today. In fact, the exact opposite. So I don't know what that means. I mean, you could argue if he's a little crankier that maybe things are more focused, and or you can argue that because he wasn't, that maybe he's accepted his lot in life. I'll just say this. The Eagles have been blown out very, very few times and since Doug has been here. They generally don't get blown out of games. They've been within a touchdown in every loss this season. I think it's going to be a lot closer than a lot of people expect. I don't think the Saints are running away with this game. It's hard to pick the Eagles to win it. I don't know anybody from a logic standpoint that says they're going to go in and win this football game. But I do think it's going to be closer than people expect.
Yeah. Before we get your pick on the game, John, where's an area on the Saints, specifically on the defensive side of the ball, that Philly can go after, where maybe they're a little weak?
You can throw the football, except for Marcus Lattimore in the secondary. And Patrick Robinson, remember, our old friend, is injured. He's out for the year. They traded for Eli Apple. They're not good in the secondary. Kurt Coleman, another ex-Eagle, is back there. So people have been able to throw the football. I think they're 31st in the league. I don't have it in front of me in pass defense. They're first in run defense. And a lot of people say you can't run against them. Well, that's not even true. Teams have been able to run situationally.
They're up big a lot.
But generally, yeah, you get behind, and it's so easy to throw the football. That's the way teams have played the Saints. So they're not great defensively by any stretch of the imagination. They're a little bit better than they have been 4 or 5 years ago. And they're still improving, and they're going in a positive direction. But they're not great at all on the defensive side of the ball, and that's why people look at it and say you have to win a shootout, and that's probably true. But there have been games this year, most notably Cleveland should have beat them, and that's the Cleveland Browns, who had about 8 missed kicks in that game. Otherwise, they win. Minnesota, I think, outplayed them, but had 2 key turnovers. So there are times this year.
The Ravens game, too, where Tucker missed the extra point.
Yeah, exactly. Or that's going. And that never, talk about being, that's the best kicker I've ever seen.
Right. And to be fair, just going over their schedule now that you bring this up, they beat the Rams, but they were at home. The teams that they have beaten, the Bengals, the Redskins, the Giants, the Browns, the Falcons. None of these teams are the Redskins are okay, but none of these teams are jumping off the page of, hey, we're a Super Bowl contender, really, other than the Rams.
No, and that's what I'm saying. You look at and they deserve credit. You can only play who's in front of you, and their record is what their record is. This is one of the best teams in the NFL. But what I'm trying to say is, I don't look at this team and say it's unbeatable by any stretch of the imagination. I think there are some holes, and even on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
As good as Thomas is, and I think he's been the best receiver in football this year, and I mentioned Kamara, they don't have a secondary receiver. That's why they brought in Des Bryant, and he got hurt, and they had to bring in Brandon Marshall. There's a reason, because they don't have a complement, and they're looking for that. So there are holes on this football team. Obviously, it's easier said than done to take advantage of them. But that's sort of a few of the reasons why I think the Eagles are going to keep this closer than some people think.
We'll see it all happen, of course, this Sunday right here on 97.3 ESPN. You can hear the countdown to kickoff starting at 1 p.m. as Mosher, McMullen, and Krause will have the countdown to kickoff show for you. 1 to 3 at the Landmark, right? They're moving that to the Landmark this week due to the weather last night. So you'll hear that 1 o'clock right here on 97.3 ESPN. Real quick, because the Saints have won 8 in a row. They've been playing really well. Their offense is what everybody talks about. Kamara is the guy. Michael Thomas Kamara. If you could take one of those guys out, which guy would you focus more on and say, I'll let the other guy get his?
Kamara, because as good as Michael Thomas is, and I just said I think he's been the best receiver in football, you know what you're getting. Kamara's more of, he can do it running the football. He can do it catching the football. He can beat you in both ways. And he's such a difficult matchup because there's few players around the league that you can compare him to and can do similar things. You met Christian McCaffrey's one of them, but he's not as explosive. People will say Todd Gurley, but he's not even. People call him an MVP candidate. He's not even as explosive as this guy. Now, he gets the ball more. He has more volume. But as far as what he's able to do and as far as matching up, I don't know how you stop him. And especially when you're the Eagles and you have your linebackers, Jordan Hicks and Nigel Bradham, have not been effective with lesser running backs coming out of the backfield, catching the football. So I look at that matchup and I say, how do you stop it? And my answer is, I have no idea.
Well, nobody really has. The Saints have scored the last couple of weeks. They've put a 50-burger up against the Bengals, 45 against the Rams, 30 against the Vikings, 43 against the Redskins, 43 against the Falcons. They scored 40 and lost a game earlier this year. So we know they can score. Drew Brees, the man. John McMullen, give us your pick for Sunday as the Eagles kind of need this one.
Yeah, they do. I have the Saints winning it 34-27, but I do have it a touchdown game. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a one-possession game late and the Eagles are in it. But it's tough to pick them to win the way they've been playing this season in that environment, in that dome. And while I say that, I will still say if it goes the way I think it's going to go, I still don't think the season is over for the Eagles because the next 3 weeks after this game are all NFC East games, and it's a bad division. And if they lose this game and then run the table on those 3 games, they're still in it.
I tend to agree. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine today, and he's like, I think they're going to lose this week, but I don't think they're out of it. You got the 3 – I used this parallel earlier, John. Last year they lost that game to the Chiefs 27-20. That score sound familiar? All right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's a matter of not necessarily – because remember, we're at 4-5, Mike, the Eagles. They have yet to win consecutive games. So it's hard to assume they're going to win 3 straight if they fall to 4-6. So it's more, to me, it's more about how bad the rest of this division is.
Right. Well, I'm just saying, they lost that game 27-20 against the Chiefs, went to L.A. against the Chargers, ran the ball, turned the season around, won 9 in a row. If they win 9 in a row, where does that put them?
Yeah. Well, I don't think that. I'm not going to say that's going to happen. Well, right now, I'm just focused on winning a very, very bad division.
Yeah.
And if you look at it, the Redskins are playing the Texans. I could certainly see Houston beating the Redskins.
Okay.
The Cowboys, I think, have the Falcons. I certainly can see the Falcons beating the Cowboys. This is a really, really arguably the worst division in football.
Sure.
And you saw Washington last week. People say, and they deserve credit for winning that game.
Yeah.
But if you saw that game against the Buccaneers and you didn't know the score, you would find it hard to believe they lost the game. They were in the red zone all afternoon, couldn't do anything with it. So it's not like they played well by winning that football game. And I think ultimately the Redskins, because of the injuries on their offensive line, are probably going to come back to the pack.
All right, John McMullen here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. He appeared via the Boardwalk on the hotline. Thank you, John. Enjoy the game.
Thank you, Mike.